long before Socrates questioned truth.
You know, when we think of geniuses who changed the world, names like Einstein, Newton, maybe Socrates come to mind, right? But what if I told you that long before any of them, there was one man who some say decoded life itself? I mean, his name was whispered in ancient temples, a name that supposedly held the keys to, well, everything: creation, architecture, medicine. And yet, for thousands of years, that same name was pretty much erased from memory. It's a wild thought, isn't it? How does the first true genius in recorded history just disappear? Well, that's what we're going to dig into today. Let's uncover the incredible story of Imhotep. Okay, so to really get this, we have to go back in time. And I mean way back. We're not talking about a couple hundred years ago. We're talking millennia. Picture this: we're in ancient Egypt, almost 4,700 years ago. And it's here that we find a mind so far ahead of its time, it's almost unbelievable. And that mind belonged to a man named Imhotep. His name actually means he who comes in peace, which is kind of ironic because his impact was anything but peaceful. It was absolutely revolutionary. We believe he was the first true multidisciplinary genius, a polymath whose name was actually written down in history. But here's the twist. Over the centuries, the real story of the man got tangled up and transformed into the legend of a god. And this is where the story gets really juicy. You know how it is, right? When someone achieves things that are just so incredible, so far beyond what anyone else is doing, the line between man and myth starts to get a little fuzzy. Well, for Imhotep, that line wasn't just blurred, it was totally redrawn. People literally started worshiping him as a god. So you've got these two versions of the same guy. On the one hand, there's the legend, Imhotep, the god of medicine, son of a creator god, a divine being people prayed to for 2,000 years. And then you have the reality, the actual man, a royal chancellor, a high priest, a brilliant but very much mortal human being. So that begs the question, right? What on earth did this guy do that was so incredible people thought he was a god? Well, get ready because the answers are, honestly, they're staggering. All right, let's move past the myths and look at the hard evidence of his genius. We're talking about tangible things, stuff we can still see and study today. These are the achievements that literally changed the world and laid the foundation for, well, for entire fields of science and art. First off, just look at his resume. This guy wasn't a one-trick pony. He was the pharaoh's chief architect. He was the nation's top doctor, the high physician. He was the prime minister, the vizier, basically running the entire country. And he was a famous philosopher and scribe. I mean, to be an expert in that many fields, that's almost impossible, even by today's standards. Okay, let's talk architecture. His first game changer. Before Imhotep, everything important was built with mud brick. You know, stuff that just falls apart over time. He comes along and has this revolutionary idea. Let's build with stone. He designed and built the world's first massive stone building, the Step Pyramid of Djoser. Think about that. He didn't just make a better mud hut, he invented a way to build something that would last forever. And as if reinventing architecture wasn't enough, he did the same thing for medicine. There's an ancient text, the Edwin Smith Papyrus, that scholars believe is based on his work. It documents more than 100 medical procedures and anatomical notes. We're talking about setting broken bones, stitching wounds, even doing surgery. And get this was 2,000 years before Hippocrates, the guy we all learn about in school as the father of medicine. It's mind-blowing. And here's the really crucial part. In a time when everyone thought sickness was a curse from the gods or some evil magic, Imhotep was using logic. He was observing symptoms, diagnosing problems, and prescribing actual treatments. He was practicing evidence-based medicine. He was, for all intents and purposes, the world's very first scientist. But as amazing as all that is, his biggest legacy wasn't a pyramid or a medical text. Nope, it was his mindset. It wasn't just what he knew, it was how he thought. His real genius was in the way he connected ideas from completely different fields. You could call it a nexus mind space. It's this whole philosophy of deep thinking. The idea is that the biggest breakthroughs don't come from being a super specialist in just one thing. They come from being able to connect ideas from different areas, architecture, medicine, politics, to solve really complex problems in a new way. And it seems he had a process for it, a kind of three-step path. First, he would synthesize. Basically, he'd pull together everything he knew from all his different jobs. Then, he'd identify the core principles, the universal patterns.
like how the principles of structure and balance that help you build a pyramid might also apply to healing a human body. And finally, he'd apply those big picture principles to innovate and solve completely new challenges.
You know, a story like Imhotep's really makes you think, doesn't it? We tend to see ourselves as the most advanced people ever. But what if we've forgotten as much as we've learned? What if the secrets to real genius and deep thinking aren't some new discovery, but something ancient we've just lost touch with? And maybe that's the real lesson here. Maybe this kind of wisdom isn't actually lost. Maybe it's just waiting. It's waiting for those of us who are daring enough to look back and remember. Because his story isn't just some dusty old history lesson. It's a blueprint. It's a guide for how we can think differently, how we can break out of our little boxes and connect ideas in new ways. It's a model for self-mastery. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If one person could do all of that almost 5,000 years ago, what have we forgotten? What essential truths about what we're capable of have we lost along the way?